Hey guys, my name is Haley and today we're going to be filming a book tag, which if you have not been on BookTube for several years like I have, I've been around since I think it was 2016, 2015, somewhere in there. I've been here for about 8-ish years, and actually I think my BookTube anniversary just passed and I did nothing for it because filming has not been happening this month. But as I tried to jump back on the train, I wanted to share two of the booktubers that I follow for the last several years have also just posted tags and are trying to bring them back. So Sam from Thoughts on Tomes made one that I will be doing here soon, and then the one I'm filming today is going to be called Where My Lore Started book tag, and this one was created by Carrie Can Read. If you might also know her as Carrie Cakes because she has a vlog channel about her life in Korea. But I wanted to film a tag video because I miss tag videos, and that was how I used to find other booktubers back in the day, and I feel like they're not a thing anymore, and it makes me really upset because it was also just an easy go-to video idea. And now I feel like a lot of booktube has become, you have to come up with the best concept or YouTube won't show your video to anyone. So let's hope the tag videos come back so we can actually find more creators that are along our own book tastes. But yeah, I'm gonna do this tag. I don't even know how to tag somebody on YouTube because that wasn't a thing. You just like assumed somebody would see it. So I'll tag her down below and leave her channel link if you do not follow her. But I really like this tag a lot, so I'm doing this one first. And I believe I have my iPad up. Sorry if it's shaking the thing. I believe there are 11 questions for this one, so let's jump right on into it. First question is, what is the first book you remember reading by yourself? And things to know about me. I have been reading since I was very, very young. I want to say I was like 3 years old when I started reading because my mother I am the oldest of my family, and so I was the benefit of my mom who stayed home a lot and like actually taught me a lot of things before I ever went to preschool or to kindergarten. So I started reading when I was very, very young, but I don't have a whole lot of memories of that. But the first one I vividly remember seeking out by myself was Prisoner of Azkaban, like Harry Potter. And I started reading that when I was like 11. I might have been 12. I think I was 11 though, because I had seen the first two movies out on VHS. Like I didn't even go to the theater and see those ones, to my knowledge or in my memory. And the first one I sought out because the third movie was not out yet was Prisoner of Azkaban. So while completely skipping the first two Harry Potter books, I went and read the third one. And then I still had to wait for the next movies to come out, so I went back eventually and read the first two books. And that was the first book I remember vividly looking for myself to go find and seek out. So, yeah. As an adult now, I am no longer a supporter of that series due to some terrible things of the author, but that is still my question. My answer. Question number 2 is, what character did you identify with the most in elementary school? Again, I hate to even very vaguely promote this author, and I would like to be clear, I do not promote her anymore, but it is a big part of my childhood. So the character I identify with the most, and I still do to this day, is Hermione. And honestly, like Emma Watson in general, I feel like I identified a lot with throughout my life watching her grow up because she is closer to my age of the members of the cast. But yes, I absolutely was Hermione. I feel like I still am. And it's not just because I read a lot. I think her personality is very much mine. I was very abrasive. I still am. I'm very straightforward. I'm very much, I come at you with facts. Like that's me. I am a Hermione. Question number 3 is, what was your elementary school comfort book? Honestly, this is the one where I'm like, I can't remember if I read this before or after I read Prisoner of Azkaban, but the book I know I've read multiple times and I borrowed the shit out of when I was in elementary school, was elementary into middle school, was A Wrinkle in Time. That is the book I, to my knowledge, have read the most of any other book in my life. I know I read it upwards of 10 times. I wish I had a Goodreads back to like my entire childhood so I could remember everything that I read when I was that age, because I read so much and there's no way for me to have documented it because I wasn't a journaler either, and I kind of wish I had been. But yeah, A Wrinkle in Time is definitely one of my like most read books of all time, and I started reading it somewhere around that age. Question number 3 is, where or what was your safe space as a kid? And honestly, for me, it was my middle school, specifically library. And there was an old man who ran that library. I don't know where he is now. I imagine that he has passed away because he was like upward, like late 60s to my knowledge when I was in middle school, and I am now 32, and that was a very long time ago. So, or I'm not 32 yet. I will be in like a month and a half. But his name was Mr. Haggerty, and he quite literally would just like let me go through each week, because I would get a big stack and I would carry them around like this in my arms around my middle school hallway because I had too many books to fit in my backpack, and all my actual school stuff was in my backpack. And I would carry around a stack of books to every single one of my classes in middle school. And every week I would return those books to Mr. Haggerty at the library, and I would get a new stack of books. And I think by the time I had graduated middle school, over those 3 years, I'm pretty sure I had read the entire library. It wasn't a huge library, but it was like the ground floor of Highland, which was my middle school, which doesn't exist anymore, so I have no problem giving that away. And that was my safe space for a long time. I will say that did evolve into, there was my favorite teacher I've ever had was in middle school as well. I feel like I'm one of the weird people that really like peaked and like had a great time in middle school, and then high school was kind of terrible for me. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that process, but my art teacher is my favorite teacher I've ever had. And it wasn't because I liked art. I actually actively don't like art or like art class. I don't like people telling me how to be artistic. I like to just figure it out on my own. So my art teacher, who was Mr. Supon, who I did actually reach out to post schooling, and like was like, hey, you were my favorite teacher, you made a big impact on my life, just because he was such a good teacher at creating a safe space in which middle schoolers, as we do, have a lot of drama going on a lot of the time. And I felt like I was just always welcome in that room, and I spent a lot of time there after school with a lot of my friends. Some of that involved art, like I've joined an art club and everything. Even though I personally did not care for art, the safe space that teacher created made a big difference in my schooling career. So definitely the library and the art class that I was in. And then question number 4 is, how has your taste in books changed since childhood? Honestly, the biggest difference is that I, for most of my life, read almost exclusively fantasy. Like, to my knowledge. Occasionally I would read like a kid's horror book. Like, I grew up on like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, don't get me wrong. I also like grew up on Goosebumps, but for the most part, the vast majority of what I read was fantasy. And I think that's a big difference in the current online book community now, is a lot of the people that are in, or at least the larger creators that are in the book community now, started out, like, a lot of them started reading in the pandemic. They didn't like reading since high school. And if I'm wrong, please let me know your reading journey down below, but that is the impression that I get of a lot of really big book creators, is that romance is a lot of what like blew up the book community, and now it's transformed into romantasy. But it's also become very clear to me of people who didn't read fantasy before or had never read fantasy before, especially with the hype around Fourth Wing, that people don't know how fantasy used to be. And as somebody who grew up on it, I'm like, I don't understand a lot of the criticisms of like Fourth Wing or other big fantasy series. I also don't understand certain series that are like hyped to high heavens, like ACOTAR. I've read ACOTAR twice. I read it in different formats, thinking I was just like, maybe I missed something. I don't like that series, and I think it's because, well, there's several reasons, but I do get why somebody who had never read fantasy before would like Fourth Wing and ACOTAR. I personally would advocate for Fourth Wing over ACOTAR, but I definitely just was the kid who grew up on fantasy books and didn't start reading romance until like 5 or so years ago. So now the biggest change in my book taste is that I have incorporated romance a lot more, especially dark romance. I'm a big fan of dark romance. If you had asked me a couple years ago if that was going to be the case, I probably would have laughed at you. But yeah, the biggest difference is the incorporation of like romance, especially into my reading taste, because I do read a lot of it now. Question number 5 is, did you feel inspired to read by your school? And if yes, how did your upbringing encourage reading? As I said, my mom definitely incorporated reading into my life very, very early on. So I've never not liked reading. I think the longest time I went without reading was in high school, and it was because I was doing so much theater, to the point where theater in the long hours after school replaced a lot of my reading time. And it wasn't that I was like putting reading off for any reason in particular. other than I hated, like a lot of people, a lot of the stuff my high school made us read. But there were some that I did enjoy, so I wasn't like completely put off of reading. I would say that my school encouraged reading, even in the ones where like one of my least favorite books of all time that I was forced to read in high school was Grapes of Wrath. I think now I would be more interested in that because of the concept of the Dust Bowl is very interesting to me, and I know that was like a big part of it, and like the Trail to Oregon. Like I know all of that was a part of that book, but 16-year-old me who was forced to read that was not having it. I will always say my least favorite books of all time are The Grapes of Wrath and Jane Eyre, because both of them were forced down my throat in school, and like they were ones I valiantly tried over and over to like get into because I was the reader. I was supposed to like the books we read in school, and those two I could not. I refused. But overall, yes, I would say that my schooling like encouraged reading for the most part. Question number 6 is, what books have you wanted to return to lately? Honestly, the one that has been in my brain a lot is Pendragon. I think I talked about it a lot when I first started my booktube channel, because I think I was doing a reread of them at the time, but also it's been almost 10 years since I did that reread, and every like once in a while that urge comes back. Because the Pendragon series by DJ MacHale was a huge part of my childhood, like post Harry Potter, and I was a big fan, and I'm still a big fan to this day every time I've done a reread, even as an older teen or now as an adult. But another one that has like come back into my brain is what's the first one called? Inkheart. The Inkheart trilogy by Cornelia Funke. I don't know how to pronounce her name now. I've never heard her say it out loud. But I picked up, I think it's the third one, Ink Death, in a little free library recently, and reminded me how much I loved that series. So those are two that I feel like I might revisit sometime soon. Oh my gosh, you know it's another one that I picked up at a thrift store? The Warrior Cats series. I know those were for like kids that were much younger than me, but I did get into at least the first series of them, and now there's like literally 100 books because they're all spin-offs of the main series. But I picked up the whole like 6-book first series the other day at a thrift store, and I'm like weirdly pumped to reread those by Erin Hunter. Question number 7 is, your favorite or formative YA series? Again, like every other millennial, I very much could say Harry Potter, but I'm gonna pick a different one because of reasons. So I honestly would go with Divergent. Divergent was a big pivot point because, as I mentioned, I did a lot of theater. Like I was constantly in a show for like almost 4 full years when I was in high school, both like the theater club at my school and also community theater. Like I did theater at 3 or 4 different community theaters in my area as a teenager, and the book series that actually got me back into reading was Divergent. I like went to Barnes & Noble, and even when I was like reading a lot, Barnes & Noble was not my go-to, but I went to Barnes & Noble with a friend when I was like 19, I think, and saw the Divergent series and went, oh, I think this kind of reminds me of The Hunger Games, picked it up, and it blasted me right back into how much I loved reading. And I definitely like think me making a channel is due to me reading Divergent, like 100%. Is if I'm not mistaken, that was how I found BookTube, was like all of the really old booktubers, old now, like Christine Riccio and like Jessie the Reader and Kat and all of them were the big booktubers at the time. And now obviously there's hundreds of booktubers, if not thousands, and they were also reading Divergent at the time, and I'm pretty sure that's how I found BookTube. I thought it was just a couple of people, and then I found out it was a whole community, and I eventually joined it after a while of watching it. So for me, that was a very, very formative series. I also very much could mention The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games was very formative for me, and with Sunrise on the Reaping having just come out, reminded me how formative that series is and how much different it hits as an adult, especially in the current US political climate. Question number 8 is a book you had to read in school that you loved. I have one from middle school, which was The Outsiders. I don't remember if I read it in middle school or elementary school. I think it was middle school. It was either 6th or 7th grade. But The Outsiders was one that I always really, really liked. Could I tell you the full plot of it today? No. But I know that it had a huge impact on me and how I viewed the world and like how I viewed other people and people who are very different from me. So I will mention The Outsiders. And the other one is To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird has always been one of my favorites, and I feel like most of us who are forced to read it in school is a very important look at bullying and the idea of going after somebody who is different from you and like making fun of them and how detrimental and how big of an issue that can be. So those are the two that I definitely really loved reading because of school. Oh gosh, I didn't go find my copy for this next question, but I will throw up a picture. But my weirdest favorite book, and like I don't even think it would make a list of favorite books, but like one of the weirdest books that has stuck with me that I read in middle school is Revenge of the Road Weenies. This is a whole series. It is horror short stories, like scary stories to tell in the dark. Like those were very popular when I was a kid, probably because of Goosebumps. But these short stories stuck with me, and now every time I see a copy of any book in this series or by this author, David Lubar, who I did actually meet at an author signing when I was like 12. It was like organized by my like literature teacher or whatever they were called in middle school. I don't remember. I think it might have been language arts teacher. That's what we called it when I was in middle school. But she took us to this author event. David Lubar is apparently a local author. Did not know this. And he was there for, I think we were there specifically for his book Dunk, which had just come out, which is a contemporary, but he has all of these like horror short stories in this Road Weenies series. And as you can see from the cover, like I picked it up in a thrift store recently. My partner was like, "What in the world is that?" And I was like, this is a series I loved as a kid. He was like, what is it? And I have to be like, oh, it's like scary stories to tell in the dark, but like it looks goofier because it's a children's series, but these stories are dark. And it was a funny conversation. So I would say that my weirdest favorite book is probably this one. Question number 10 is, if your 13-year-old self could live in a fictional world, which world would it be? I hate to be that guy, but it definitely would be Hogwarts. Hogwarts is the least threatening of all of the fantasy worlds that I read as a child. I also didn't grow up on Narnia. I did read them eventually as like an older teen. I did not grow up on them. So I also don't think I would like Narnia with all of the Christian implications, especially me now having escaped from a Christian cult. But the one I went with instead of Hogwarts was Inkheart, because there's a whole storyline. Slight spoilers for Inkheart if you've never read the trilogy. There's a whole storyline about how one of the characters can, if they read the story aloud, they can transport others or themselves into the story. So in that case, I could go into any story. So I think I'm going to go with, I would like to live in the Inkheart world where that magic is possible. And then question number 11, which is the last question, is there a newly released book you wish you would have had when you were younger? And honestly, I didn't come up with a very specific book for this answer, because my answer is more like developed than that, for lack of a better term. And that is literally any queer YA book that is coming out right now or has come out in the last couple of years. If I had had Gay the Prey Away by Natalie Naudus, or Loveless by Alice Oseman, or God, what's another really popular one? Any of those like queer YA, Heartstopper even would have made a huge difference to me. If I had had any of those, I'm gonna get emotional. If I had had any of those before I joined my Christian cult when I was 19 years old. I believe it was 2013. It would have made all the difference, because I was the very loud, opinionated teenage kid who did all the theater, who knew a lot of queer people, because that is usually a safe space. Like, theater is a safe space for a lot of queer people growing up. If I had had any of those stories to develop my own interest in my own sexuality as a teenager, I don't think I would have ended up in the cult that I did. And the difference that would have made to my life after somebody who went through 8 years of being in that cult, and how hard it was to get out of it, and how much it changed my life, because I lost a lot of people going into it and then lost even more coming out. I envy a lot of the kids who are of that age group now, who have those books to explore the idea of, you're not alone. You're not the weird one. There's nothing wrong with you. And the empathy that you learn through those stories would have made all the difference to me. as a teenager, and even now reading them as an adult. That's why even though I don't really read a whole lot of YA anymore, the ones I will read are queer stories, because they make me sob my eyeballs out, because I needed those as a kid and they didn't exist. And now they're being banned to all hell by so many states and because of the current administration, and I will always fight against every ounce of that with every fiber of my being. Sorry, I'm starting to like tear up, and I don't want to cry on camera because that's not me. But yeah, and on that note, that is my book tag. The book tag created by Carrie Can Read, where my lore started. Let me know if any of these answers are ones you can relate to. If you have nothing to say but you would like to boost a video, because as I said, my videos have been like shadow banned or whatever the heck we call it on YouTube, of like the algorithm's just not showing them anymore, and I refuse to give in and make a new channel because I've had this one for so long and it means something to me. So if you want to just leave an emoji, leave me the purple heart emoji down below for Loveless, because that one in particular made a huge difference in my life and my reading. So Loveless by Alice Oseman, one of my favorite books of all time. But thank you all for watching. If you have any similar stories or even vastly different stories that you would like to talk about in the comments down below, I would love to chat with you. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.